Welcome to the Becoming Sovereign podcast put on by Sovereign. I'm your host, Brandon Karpeles. And as we started doing in the last episode, we are going to be digging into the V for V verse and the people supporting the show. And I'm going to try to manage this as best I can. I sometimes gang tape episodes and they get put out week after week. And so I try to make them more evergreen, unlike our guest who I have today, who is a legend in the daily podcasting space, None Ya Business, aka David Bennett. And so, two very different formats, and certainly the value for value read-offs work a lot better when you have a more traditional sort of set schedule and are doing it current event type things and that sort of stuff, but that's just not the format of this pod. So I'm trying to work through the best way to do it. So where we left off last time was 3 episodes ago when I had Eric FJ on. So I'm going to read the 2 episodes after that, the one with Zach from Indie Hub, and then with Paul in the Jungle and Director Hoddle was the episode after that. And then I'm going to save the Eric FJ episode for my next guest next week, because if I read that off, I'm going to have no V for V on this episode. So please just work with me here, audience. So the one from 2 times ago, the Zach from Indie Hub, Rev Hoddle zapped 321 sats, and he said, for anyone thinking anything about Bitcoin has failed. The reality is it has hardly begun. And oh my gosh, I can't read. Okay, sorry. For anyone thinking anything about Bitcoin has failed, the reality is that hardly anything about Bitcoin has even begun. Much better said than me. So thanks, Rep, for that. And unfortunately, the Paul and Director Hoddle episode had no zaps or boost on the Fountain episode. It is what it is. So be it. All right. Moving along. Nanya, David, what do you want me to call you? Mr. Bennett? What do you prefer here?
You call me David is fine.
All right, sounds good. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. I've been interacting with you on Nostr probably. You were in one of the very early cohorts, sort of that Dorsey-led Fiat Jeff JB55 crew at the end of 2022, and some people have fallen off, some people have stuck around, and really appreciate all you've done, all the interaction, and it's an honor to talk to you today. So welcome.
Thank you, Brandon. I appreciate you inviting me on the show.
Yeah, so for those that don't know, David does a daily podcast. It's called Bitcoin, and it's a great podcast. Everyone should go subscribe to it. And it is one of the most thorough podcast. It covers so many topics. It covers the news of the day. It gets into economics. It gets into philosophy. It gets into permaculture. It gets into all sorts of different topics, as many of these Bitcoin podcasts are wont to do. And personally, David, I think you're probably one of the most well-versed jack of all trades. Not sure how you want to frame it. I would even call you like a queen, or maybe even a king of all trades, if we're using the 52 card deck analogy here. But how did you sort of get interested in such manifold topics and really form a very coherent understanding and relaying of information around all those topics?
Well, before I even got into Bitcoin, I was trained as a biologist, specifically cell and molecular biology, and I also went to a Texas Tech, which is started out as an agriculture and mechanical engineering school. So it was an A&M school. So out in Lubbock, you got a lot of cotton farming. So ag was big all the way from my hometown in Midland, Texas, all the way up to when I went to Lubbock to go to school up there. So I didn't grow up on a farm or playing with soil or anything like that. But it was just all around me. And then by the time that I got out of biology, I started looking into stuff like aquaponics and hydroponics, and then that led me to permaculture. Permaculture led me to regen agriculture. And what's funny about it is that when I found Bitcoin, all the people that were talking about Bitcoin was using the exact same language that all the people that I had started to respect in permaculture were using. They were using things like anti-fragile and resilience and things of this nature. And at that time, I didn't really know just how jacked up the money system was. I found that out later, as we all do. And somehow or another, I thought that because of that connection, because all those people were talking they were talking about things like low time preference, and again, anti-fragility and resilience, and permaculture and regen ag and all these things had nothing, like literally nothing to do at all with Bitcoin or economics, at least not the way that they were presenting it. However, when I got enough under my belt about Bitcoin, it became really evident that we're all talking about the same thing. So when I designed Bitcoin, and what I tried to do is say, look, I want to be able to do at least two things. One is, because this space moves so fast and news comes out and it's just like a torrent of what's going on, it would be almost impossible. What I really wanted was a podcast that would read me the news every day so I could keep up with what was going on, and it didn't exist. And sort of the thing where, well, you got to become the thing that you want to see in the world. So I started it there, but I was like, well, it can't just be that. There are other things, like in my particular case, the things that I'm interested in, like permaculture, regen ag, trees, forests, soil, fire ecologies, things like that. There are places where the thoughts and philosophies that ride along with Bitcoin, like I said before, also ride along with this entire other pattern of thinking. And if I could find places where those two overlapped, then I'd be able to introduce these other things into the Bitcoin world. And now I'm trying to figure out ways to introduce Bitcoin into the regen permaculture world, because it's like a Venn diagram where there's like this slight overlap between the circles. And that's what I call, and it's also called in permaculture and regen ag, edge effect, where you've got two completely different environments that are nudging up against each other. And as they do, you can find some common ground. And I think that actually makes things a little bit easier to understand on both sides of that fence.
Your podcast seems to be the only one out there that it really does distill down the daily news in a way that you can digest it. And it was exactly the podcast you wanted it to be. And I'm unaware of anyone else out there doing that. So I've always appreciated being able to just tune into your podcast, even if it's only a couple days a week or something like that, and feeling like I'm getting caught up. But recently I know you've been going on the Daniel Prince podcast, and you've been talking about some pretty wild and out there ideas that are plausible and doable. As I listen to them, they make sense. That being said, I think kind of a central point of those ideas is that they are a big undertaking, and they're something that's going to take more than our lifetime potentially, and maybe the torch needs to get passed to someone else to start or finish it. But I'm curious, what do you see yourself actually beginning sort of the physical undertakings of these projects, or are you doing this more as a blueprint for, hey, this is an idea, I'm putting it out there, someone else can run with this?
I'd like to do them. That would be optimal. And if if I had the amounts of money that it would take, I would actually already be doing them. The problem is that generally speaking, the people that come up with the idea of anything, good, bad, or indifferent, generally speaking, they don't really have the money to enact that. And in some cases, they go and chase down venture capital. And in other cases, they may go chase some kind of other kind of, private equity or something like that. And I don't have those tools available to me, which is fine. It's just that even if I did, the issues that I usually talk about, like the Cathedral Project is the one that I'm working on the most right now. The return on investment of something like that, you're literally looking at decades. For if somebody were to come, hey, I love this idea, let's get this rolling. I'm like, yeah, are you prepared to wait 50 years, for any kind of return? And that by itself is indicative of where we sit with general global economics. Is that it's all about is the juice worth the squeeze? And back when people would think in terms of generations, the juice of these kinds of ideas was worth the squeeze. That's what lots of people did that. They would back the building of giant cathedrals. Like religion, by and large, I mean, even though the Catholic Church is extremely wealthy and they are huge landholders, that took forever to get rolling. So when you're talking about the Catholic Church in medieval Europe, and they are still building giant cathedrals, there was not going to be a return on investment of that. They were doing it for completely different reasons, and they were not straddled by the ethics and economies and general philosophies that we've developed in the West over the last 250, 300, 400 years. Because now it's more about, like what I talked about it on the show today. Strip malls are a really good indication of where we've gone. They're generally speaking, there's no real good architecture behind them. They don't really become a destination to go to that you want to, once you're there, that you actually enjoy being there. And subsequently, after they're alive and have generated enough income for 15, 20 years, you start seeing them get abandoned. And I talked about this particular example on the show today. There's a half-mile long strip mall between Spokane, Washington, and Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And I can't remember the name of it, but 80% of it is vacant, and it's only 15 years old. And when you see these mammoth investments like that, and they're 80% vacant after 15, 20 years, what I gather out of that is that they've made their investment back and they don't care. It's not a priority to fix the problems with the building. That causes vendors and people that are renting your spaces to move out. And honestly, if you've made your money back from something like that and you don't care about the property, and you don't care about the future of the property, and you don't care about the buildings upon the property, then of course this is going to happen. And that's not what we see with gigantic projects that were undertaken from 12th century England, all the way up through, let's say they stopped kind of really getting into this stuff around the 18th century. Now it's different. We look at economics differently. We look at investment differently. Everything that humans, have have a tendency to drift off into hyperbole, but everything that humans were is not what we are now. And what we've lost is immense. So when I think about how much time do I spend thinking about something that I will never see come to light, I have to actually be good with that. Whereas somebody else would be like, this is a waste of time. There's no reason to write a single word about it. There's no reason to make a diagram about it. There's no reason to go through any of the stuff with anybody at all, because let's just build a strip mall, get our money back so that we can build 2 more, so we can get our money off that, so we can build 3 more. And then all you're left with is places like the outskirts of Austin, Texas and Dallas, Texas, that honestly, you don't even know where you're at. There's no telltale signs that say this is Dallas architecture. In the core of Dallas, there is. But on the outskirts of these cities, you don't know where you're at.
Well, it's even worse, right? It's let's earn back enough money to be able to roll into the next project to borrow 80% against for 3 more buildings. So it's it's like a double whammy of even more monetary creation. And what you're talking about is something Bitcoiners have talked about forever, that in an inflationary environment with an inflationary currency, it's almost impossible to do what you're saying, because the economics simply won't allow you to save your money into the future. And so you have to go monetize something else. You have to go generate cash flow streams for yourself that will be able to support the next round of debt and be able to generate enough for you to go obtain the next round of debt. And so what you're talking about is it makes it almost impossible to justify building something that would last hundreds of years. And I do want to get into that topic with you as well, because I have a question about all that for you. But I mean, you even think about the classic example in the Bitcoin space is like the Medici family, right? Like they funded all this art, they funded all the Renaissance, but at the same time, something that's less talked about is they would build these giant estates because they knew 400 years from now their family would still be living there, and they wanted their estate to last that long because they wanted 10 generations later to be living there. And I don't think you could ask anyone living in the, save for maybe the most extreme cases of wealth across the world, do you envision your family living in this house? It's like, no, it's going to fall apart before my 30-year mortgage is even fully amortized, and it's going to need all these repairs. And so you don't even bother to do that because you can't even envision the future that would be where making something that lasts forever even benefits your family. It's almost to the detriment of your family to do that, because of your point, the economics don't work out, and you're actually not able to accrue as much wealth into the future.
Well, that's sort of one of the cornerstones of concepts like Cathedral, which, for your listeners, is a 1,000-acre plot of land that seeks to regenerate that land through several different industries all coexisting at the same time. And that's all I'll say about that. But what I mean is that what you say about like a family living in a house that their grandparents lived in, and that all of that is superseded by the messaging that we've all gotten, and I got it too. And that messaging, especially in the West at least, and I'm not speaking for Latin America, and I'm not speaking for Africa or any other country, but in the West, the messaging has generally been, you move out of your house at 18, and you move away to where the jobs are. And that guarantees that families are split apart. It means that your children do not live within an hour's drive of you. It means that you don't live within an hour's drive of your parents. It means that families continue to be nuclear and not extended. And I talk to people about this every once in a while, and what I'll say is that, the the deadly right-wing Republican conservative people that seek to apparently kill everybody under the sun. It's like that. That messaging, and I'm actually a conservative myself. It's just that it's kind of lost my train of thought there for a second.
Well, sort of the nuclear family as opposed to extended
Yeah,
family, and the people purporting to espouse those values may actually be
yeah,
espousing a different set of values.
well, it's that they would like we keep getting I'll get messages from and like the liberal side really doesn't think about this, but like the conservative side will generally say like things like the liberals are seeking to destroy the nuclear family. That's messaging that actually exists in the world. I'm not saying it's wrong or right, or that I hate these people or like these people. That's not the point. Like, I had a science teacher that always told me never ask why, always ask how. How gets you closer to what you want before you start asking why, because why, I don't know, Jesus wants it that way. It could be anything. But the point is that you'll hear this messaging that the nuclear family is under attack. I got news for you. The family was under attack well before we got whittled down to the nuclear family. It was, um, people will say, like for instance, here's another piece of messaging. Oh, so you live with your parents. That was standard operating procedure in 1850. Oh, you're 18 and you still live with your parents. You must be a loser. Standard operating procedure in 1875. It wasn't that it was that the fact that the extended family wasn't looked at as a negative issue. It was actually looked at as a strength. And there are people in this space that I have a great deal of respect for because of the way that they look at their family. And they love the notion that they have so many family members, and that when they go to gather for something like Christmas or Thanksgiving, that it's a horde of people. That's what you want, because that's where strength is. But when and I hate to say modern society because it's so trite, right? But it's not exactly untrue that modern society is basically built into us this message of the minute you hit 18, you're a loser if you still live with your parents. You got to get as far away from your parents as possible because the jobs can't be anywhere where your parents are. You got to move to where the jobs are. That's another message. And all you really do is strip away any potential of having support. I take that all the way to the next level. And there was something that I read a great deal of books about, as you might imagine, agriculture. And one of the books that I read had a chapter in it about, and I can't pronounce it. I want to say it's Iberican pork,
Yeah.
or
Jamón Ibérico?
something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Out of Portugal, right?
Yeah.
So this is like one of the most sought after cuts of ham that you will ever get, and it's not a ham. It's like it's cured pork, but you slice it thin, it's slightly dry. But this particular pork is fed on the acorns of the cork oak. Mm-hmm. And these cork oaks in Portugal are in groves that are 1,500 years old. They were planted, and they're constantly trees aren't cut down and replanted, but if a tree dies, the people that are taking care of that land replant that tree. This has been going on for hundreds of years. Generally speaking, these plots of land are owned by families, and they generate a great deal of money. So if the child decides to stay on this land and work with their parents and the grandparents to raise this pork, it's an instant job. and you're outside and you're working with trees and animals, and you really give a shit about the nature of the health of the soil, because that influences everything. And these guys, I read this one part where the guys that some of these older men are hanging around this cafe drinking espressos for like, that's what they do for like 4 or 5 months out of the year, because there's nothing else to do. This stuff's basically taking care of itself, and there's only a few months of the year that they really got to do a whole bunch of real actual labor, real like back-breaking labor. And the rest of the time they're enjoying their life. They're actually enjoying their family members.
Which is another massive lie we've been sold as well.
Exactly. It's like, oh, you know, well, whatever. I won't get into that one. But the thought of ag actually producing not only a product that people want, but people will pay a premium for. Yeah, that just, you know, and I see that in small scale ranchers. Like my friend Texas Slim is connected to every manner of rancher that you can imagine. And they all, like all the guys that he's trying to get a hold of, are all the guys that produce their own product and they sell it themselves. They don't sell it to JBS. They don't take their 500 head of cattle that they've cared for like the last 2 years to a slaughterhouse just so it can be ground up and thrown into Walmart. They care about their product. And they're getting hammered right now because we've gotten into a point where, like the Iberican pork or Iberico pork, JBS won't handle that. So that remains at a premium for people that have a lot of money that understand and appreciate that particular product. But for like beef in the United States, nobody gives a shit where their prime rib comes from. You should. You know, it's like getting a prime rib out of Walmart is not the same as even getting one out of Costco. Their supply chain is actually slightly better. But if you go,
I buy one whole cow every year. Sometimes we get an extra half cow to supplement, and I specifically have 4 bone prime rib taken out of that cow to have on Christmas, and that's the only time we eat prime rib, unless we're at, like, that we make it ourselves in the home for the year, as opposed to what you're talking about, where you can just go into Walmart and, you know, get prime rib, you know, every week, and it should be, you know, like a treat and a delicacy and something that you appreciate, as opposed to some, you know, $8 a pound slop that you're going to get at one of these places.
Yeah, well, you're going to be paying more like 20, like, well, in eastern Washington State, which is where I reside at the moment. It's not going to be forever, but at the moment, it's 25, anywhere between 25 and 29.50 a pound for prime rib, and it's not quality product.
Yeah, it's trash.
So yeah, it's trash. So when I'm looking at these guys over in Portugal and the way that they're thinking of their family and the way they're thinking of how they support their family long after they're dead, it boils down to they just take care of this piece of land. And the land actually ends up being the legacy that reaches out and touches family members long, long after the people that built that thing are dead. And that's one of the things that I think about when I think about anything about the Cathedral Project is, you know, it's not only how can I get as much production as I possibly can throughout the year for as long as I can throughout that year, but the quality of the product, plus how do families stay on that land and become supported throughout the entirety of this. And the enemies of all of that is things like JBS, Tyson Foods,
Cargill,
and Cargill, yeah. And it's like, and I can sit here and I can sound like, you know, the long-haired liberal hippie freak that I can sound like, you know. It's like, but you know, that goes to this war, the war of ideologies that we have in the West, that you're either conservative or you're liberal. They both suck, you know. And it's like if you're a staunch conservative, all you hate is the liberals. And if you're a staunch liberal, all you hate is the conservatives. And there is no recognition that each of these groups have a couple of things in common.
That's not by
You
accident.
know, it's not on accident. Exactly. It is. I think it's summarily built to do things like if we. Okay, here's an example. One, we were able to effectively destroy the extended family, at least in the United States, by making it like persona non grata. You know, but the damage to the nuclear family, I saw a lot of that happen in COVID. If you disagreed with another even close family member, like a direct sibling, not even a cousin, if you disagreed, there was a almost like a 50-50 chance that that person would break ties with you on bullshit. And if we've gotten to the point where we can break apart what's left of the family, which what we're left with is the nuclear family, if you can break that apart through something like that, then how weak have we become? We have no attachment to anything. We have, like for instance, I keep thinking, and this is part of Cathedral, but it stands alone. How do you build a financial legacy if you don't start out rich? How do you build a financial legacy where your children don't have to go continuously? Like, it's like my dad bought a house, I bought a house, now my kids, if they're lucky, they'll have to buy a house. Why do we keep buying houses?
That's kind of what I was
The hell's
talking
wrong
about.
with us?
Yeah, yeah.
It's like I'm expected to do. I'm expected to do what? Live my life, kill myself at a job to get as much money as I possibly can, so that I can buy a house, so that I can sell that house when I retire, so that I can pay rent on a condominium in Florida, which is arguably God's waiting room, and wait to die. And then my kids have to work that circle all over again, and we keep reinventing the wheel instead of figuring out ways to it's not just about building wealth and retaining that wealth as much as how do you build stability into future generations so that they're not wasting their time rebuilding what you already set out to build in the first place. My grandma had a house, or my grandparents had a house, and then my dad had to get a house, and then his other three brothers got houses. It seems like we keep spending a lot of time redoing the same thing. And if we didn't have to do that, if we were thinking differently, instead of the thought of, okay, you still live in the same town that you were born in and grew up in, what's wrong with you? Instead of that attitude, why is it not, oh my God, you still live, work in the same town that you were born and raised in, and you've built on what your parents built before you, and you've made your community better. That's awesome. We don't have that. We've got the first one. The first one is like, I can't believe you died in the same town you were born in. What's wrong with you? That's what we get.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's not by accident either. I mean, you look at Hollywood, you look at books, fiction, whatever. It all sort of is the same message. Exactly what you're talking about. Go live the cosmopolitan life. Go discover yourself. You can't discover yourself around your parents, can you, loser? You need to really go find who you are and what you're all about. And what you're all about is definitely not where you come from or your roots or making your community better. And listen, it sounds like you have as well. I'm guilty of it too, that I moved away, did 18, went to college, got the nice degree to go get the nice corporate job, and then moved away from my parents to go live in a house with the roommates, and then eventually go buy a home. And now we're moving into a bigger home here shortly. But it is all detached from the even the nuclear family at this point. It's forget extended family. Now we're in a position where we have people in my family and my wife's family that come look after the kids, and we get together and are somewhat local. But yeah, at the same time, we all have separate houses and different locations, and yeah, there is no one living together, and it's ideas that have been fomented by various Hollywood outfits, TV shows, whatever, and we've clearly been conditioned to think that, and it's sad and unfortunate, and I'm not even really sure. It goes beyond what you're talking about, goes beyond just like Bitcoin or being able to plan for the future or having a long-term view. It requires a cultural shift, and I don't think, like a lot of stuff, I really do think it will be solved by low time preference and looking to the future. But there's a lot of things that I think are just ingrained in culture where you have to have a cultural shift, and I see that kind of sitting outside just a longer term view. But and maybe the answer is you just have to go one by one, like you're talking about. You do it, I do it, and 3 generations later, now that society starts to form. Maybe this is not just a physical generational undertaking, but also a cultural generational undertaking as well. Have you thought about that at all, and as you've undertaken this?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's we would have to undergo a pretty radical cultural shift, and that's not going to happen. Most likely not happen overnight. It won't even happen in a few years. But that was one of the reasons why I continue to be fascinated with Bitcoin, is how I see the people that get into it start changing. I mean, in radical ways, really radical ways, where they're just like, after a while, you will, it doesn't take long before you'll see somebody who says, "Hey, I've just come to Bitcoin. I'm here to save it." And a lot of times, you start seeing them go a few years later, if they haven't completely screwed the pooch and been really, really dumb about things, they'll go. Next thing you hear them say is like, "I've been lied to about every single thing I've been told." And the second that happens, you know that every door in their mind got unlocked all at once. And that has to happen. That happens on a person by person basis. And it really, the people that fall off are the people that those doors just never unlock for. And it's sad, but more often than not, I see people who get completely unlocked, and all of a sudden they ask themselves my most fundamental question that I have for myself and other people at this moment in my life is, what is wealth? What is it? Is it lots of money? Is it lots of land? And is it a huge family? Is it a huge family that loves each other? Is it a huge family that is, they kind of like each other? Is it jewelry? Is it gold? Is it Lambos? Is it private jets? And honestly, none of the material stuff actually holds any interest for me at all. And I was a kid that my favorite Matchbox car was a Lamborghini Countach. I dreamed about one of these things. Now I just know I don't care. I would rather drive a 1981 Ford Bronco that doesn't have a computer in it than anything else, And when people will say, "Okay, well, you mentioned land. That's wealth, is it?" Even then, I have to ask questions, because if your intention is to just have 1,000 acres and it remains looking the exact same way for 100 years, that's not, if it's unproductive. Like, let me give you an example. In West Texas, where it's really dry, I've seen huge stretches of land that People will just put 100 head of cattle on, let them graze. Next thing you know, that land is degraded. And it's not because of the cattle, it's because of the management. And if you're not going to take the time to manage the land to make it better, then that land cannot be wealth for you outside of, I bought it for $100,000 and now I can sell it for $200,000, and that gets us right back into the strip mall mentality. That's not it. That's not where wealth comes from. That's not how you grow some like a pig in Portugal that is going to sell for, like, the whole animal could possibly sell for $12,000, if not more, way more than that, because of the way what it was eating. And it can't eat what it was eating unless the people really understand that land. And now the question of what is wealth is my connection, is my knowledge of this land, is that wealth? For me, it's getting closer. Is this animal, does it represent wealth? Is it sick or is it premium? If it's premium, it's wealth. If it's sick, it's a liability. And now, like, I look at a Lamborghini, I say it's a liability. I got to fix it. I'm scared to drive it. I don't want to park it because of dings. I can't afford to get it painted. Every 2 years, I got to change the timing chains. That's, $5,000. I don't want to do that. Tires. Have you ever priced Pirellis for a freaking Lambo? Man, this isn't wealth. It's a magic wand for poverty.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say that. I whenever someone sends me pictures of them with their kids or their family, my response is always true wealth. That's all I send back. And it's a bit tongue in cheek, but I do think that's why the lesson in the Bible where Christ talks about it's harder for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. And really what he's talking about, right, is that your soul is what's the true wealth, the value, and if you follow Christ, you're worth nothing. It's the salvation of Christ that gives your life value, that gives your soul value. That's how your life has value. And all the material things that you're sort of talking about out here, those are just things that people, you're not going to be taking with you. And physical sort of material wealth is not what Christ is talking about in that scenario. So what you're talking about is maybe it is material things or whatever, but it's a reflection of you and your soul and what you've done in your efforts and your labor and how you've pointed yourself, to kind of use like a Jordan Peterson phrase, like how have you directed yourself and what now has come out of that, and do you have value in the way you've directed yourself and how you've carried out that direction?
Well, yeah, like memories of love and closeness between me and my wife, I can carry that with me after I die. I don't know. Nobody knows exactly what happens after you die. Are there memories left? Sure. I hope so. I honestly hope so, but I can't sit here and tell anybody that I know that that's the truth. So for me, myself, and for nobody else, I assume that I will be able to take feelings and memories and emotions and all that with me, and I don't have to have that in a bag. And so when we talk about, it's easy, easier to enter the kingdom of heaven, and you're going through an eye of a needle, your soul can definitely go through an eye of a needle, but if you've got a bag full of 12 houses in France and Lamborghinis and bricks of gold, and you've got that in a bag, that's going to get caught in that eye. You can't pull that. And so you have a choice. You can stay there holding on to this bag of crap in some kind of weird purgatory, or you can let it go. And that's one of the reasons why I ask myself, while I'm still alive, well, what is wealth? Time on making a piece of land super productive with almost no input costs. Man, being able to do that is something I could carry with me without carrying the land itself. I don't, we put so much, we lug around so much baggage that it's incredible.
Well,
Whether we're trying to be our best selves or if we just don't care to even look at who we are. All of us are carrying around an immense amount of baggage, and most of that has come from narrative structure that we've been given on something as insidious as a television commercial.
it's
Sorry,
the
my
ultimate.
daughter is interrupting me.
Okay, that's wholesome. That's good. We like that on the show. So most of these episodes, you can hear my son crying in the background at some point. So family interruptions are always acceptable here.
Yeah, and I'm the person that literally doesn't care if the kid's crying on the plane.
Yeah,
I was like, you've got a kid.
I'm the same
Out,
way. Yeah.
Good for you, man.
I actually feel bad unless the parents are like actively facilitating it or straight up just doing nothing, where they're just like not trying to console the kid or something. Then I get a little upset. But if they're like, if you can tell that, hey, we're trying here, I can't control a 2-year-old. It's I get it.
Yeah.
I feel bad for you. So, but yeah, what you were talking about is, it's basically the definition, right, of consumerism is buy all this stuff, get all these things, you don't need it, and at the end of the day, what real value is there other than it being like you said, it's not a value, it's a liability, it's an ankle weight, it's dragging you down. So I couldn't agree more. I do want to get into something though I wanted to talk to you about. So this idea of cathedrals being built for a long time, and I live in Chicago, and I was down there this morning for a meeting, and just looking up at some of these buildings, and just the incredible architecture that's been built in these things, the care that's been given into the design, and then the stories that we've been told. They have on these buildings. You can tell the building is much older, and then they have a little plaque. It's EST 1909. We're told if you go to the Wikipedia page, it built in 9 months in 1890, and there's no plans or blueprints anywhere in the city to prove anything was built, but we know for a fact it was built for the World Fair and all these other things. And I really do, and I don't know the answer, and I do have a hard time squaring the idea of these perfect, incredible cathedrals. They were built over 500 years and all that, as opposed to, are we just in a totally different history than what actually happened, and there was just incredible technology that allowed them to build these things, and something happened along the way, and I don't have the answer. I know that what we're being told about the history of so many of these buildings and so many of these sittings, to your point, you look at downtown Dallas, and there's these buildings that look, they don't make any sense. Like, why are they here? How did they get there? You look at something like the Capitol building in a place near you, Helena, Montana. To this day, 8,000 people live there. They could all fit inside that Capitol building and all live there. What? Yeah. Why was there a need for this? And so I know something about what we're being told is completely false, but I'm curious as to how you view those sort of things and what your thoughts on this topic that floats around the Bitcoin circles every now and again. What your thoughts are on the topic?
Well, something like the Empire State Building, that whole thing was put together in 15 months.
According to Wikipedia.
15. Yeah, according to Wikipedia, but I don't have a gut feeling that says that I should doubt that. Not because Wikipedia is always honest, they're not. I'm just saying that everything that I can if it wasn't for the fact that many buildings that were built around the same time kind of all have that same story. They were built very fast, but they were built very, very well. And to me, that kind of speaks to that somehow everybody involved in the project, from architect all the way down to the guys laying bricks, cared. And it's not that they cared about that particular project, they just cared. They didn't have 12 different viewpoints trying to tear them apart from the inside at the base of ethics and morality. They weren't being told you suck because you live in the same town that you grew up in. They didn't have those pressures. They didn't have the baggage that we got as actual people. I also think that they did care about what they were building because it was going to look cool. I mean, if you walk into the main hall of, and I didn't get a chance to go see it my one time in New York City, but the main hall of the Empire State Building, it's freaking gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
It's gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it polished marble, Art Deco. The care in the detail. It's a place you want to go see. It becomes a destination. And whether these people that were building it are part of the project, whether they were financiers, whether they were the architect, or the bricklayer, like the bolt setter, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The chances are really good that they had some feeling that this is important. Whether they were conscious of it or not, I guarantee you, people back in that day were much more receptive to the idea of this is going to be here long after I'm here. The guys that build the strip mall, I guarantee you they don't. There's a difference in the way that you come at something when you have the ability to care. Whether you care about that particular thing or not, if you have the capacity to have a deeper feeling of what it means to care, like for instance, I got chastised in a college class in architecture, and I don't have an architecture degree, but I did take a lot of architecture classes in a master's degree, because I was doing 3D visualization, and one of these classes was using game engines like the Unreal game engine to build buildings so that you could show somebody what it was like to walk around a building that you built instead of just showing them some kind of 2D render. And we got on this discussion of video games, and I said one of the best video games that I ever played was Call of Duty, the first one, the very first one, not any of this modern warfare crap, which I don't like, but the first one. That thing, there was one level that I will always remember, and it was a level where you got basically parachuted into behind the lines in Germany. It was in a forest, and it was the deep winter. And the thing that struck me about this particular level is that there was almost no sound. There was no music in the background. You could, every once in a while, you'd hear wind, and you would hear a dog barking, but it was so far off that you had the feeling that it was like a mile away. But it was so quiet. It wasn't busy. And it's when I was talking about that it was actually beautiful, because you could just sit there and look at the screen, and it had a calming effect. And when I said that, they laughed at me. And it was the kind of laugh where they were like going, my God, he's wasting time pontificating on something as stupid as somebody who's built a video game. I'm like, no, there was real care that went into building that particular level, whether it was a video game or not. Somebody actually designed an experience that was different from any of the other experiences on any of the other levels. It was completely different. And there was that struck me. And there are there's a lot of people that I know that refuse to open themselves up to care about something because they're afraid they're going to be made fun of. At this point, I don't give a shit. I don't care. I just don't. There. That's what I don't care about. What I do care about is being able to be passionate about something. And I think going back to the example of these buildings, there was passion in those buildings. Whether these people were getting paid a lot to do it or not, there was still an energy that existed there that you're not going to find in somebody building the next. And I like Steak and Shake for what they do with Bitcoin, but honestly, I'm not looking at going to a Steak and Shake and looking at the building and addressing it like it was going to be a destination. It's not like something where where I'm going to think of, I'm going to forget what it looks like. I'm not going to spend that much energy on it. But
Yeah.
I see a medieval like Notre Dame, see something like that, that'll stick with you. That'll stick with you for a long, long time. I think it's a difference in the way humans are now than what we were just 100 years ago.
Interesting. So you don't necessarily buy into the sort of altered timeline or that sort of theory. You think it is more of our culture and values were truly different back then.
I do, but I'll say this. I wouldn't at all be surprised if somebody came out of the sky, dropped right in front of me, and gave me mind-bending, unaltered. It might force my inability to not believe anything other than there's an altered timeline. It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, what we don't know about existence, and I'm talking about the whole universe, the whole kit and caboodle. Like sometimes you ever read Dante's Inferno?
Parts of it, yes, but not the whole
One of the
thing.
circles,
Yeah.
one of the circles of hell. There's our friend Dante comes across this guy who he's talking to, and all of a sudden he just puts his hands in his chest and he rips himself open, and he says the words, "See how I rend myself." The second I read that, I thought about the Big Bang, and that people would go, well, where does God exist? He's not some old man with a beard, in the clouds with angels flying around him. I'm like, you're standing in him. Like for me, the universe and like all the 11 dimensions, and there may even be more, our inability to really understand time outside of some kind of linear progression. All of that, we're standing right in the middle of all of it. God, Jesus, everything. There was a woman when I was a kid, and I said something. I can't remember what I said, but she said, "God's in the fence. It's in the tree. He's in the trees. He's in the grass." It's like, because I think I asked where God lives, and I was little tiny kid, and ever since then, I can't help but think that God was the guy that said, "See how I rend myself," because he did it more than once. If he literally blew himself apart to build the universe, that's one way you rend yourself. But then you have a son, and you let that son die on the cross so that everybody else can be saved. That's like another way that you rend yourself.
Well,
So
you have the Holy Spirit, right, which is what you're talking about: living in the grass, living in the fence, all these things.
yeah, I mean, all of this, like the nuances of what the hell's going on in quantum physics. There's so much we don't know that when people say ghosts don't exist, I laugh. And it's not because I actually believe ghosts exist. I happen to pretty much believe that ghosts exist, but that's not the point. It's not that I disagree with them because I believe something different. I disagree with them because I'm like going, you don't have enough information to wad a shotgun about any of this. Going around and saying that something is or is not is, in my opinion, rather ludicrous because of what we don't know. So it's not that I don't believe in a adjusted or alternate timeline. It's that I don't need to go there because my gut feeling and my own personal answer to how do these buildings get built, it's passion. I mean, that's my answer for it. Again, it doesn't mean that if somebody fell out of the sky and said I'm from the future and I can prove it, and your timeline, how you think about time is completely jacked, I'd be like, tell me more. I would like to know more, please.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it all can be true, right? We could have an altered timeline of super passionate people building stuff, and we could be living in a mini. I don't even like the phrase dark age because it's been co-opted. It was actually quite an age of light. But I there, I agree with you. To me, kind of anything's on the table. I just, as you were talking about earlier, once you figure out Bitcoin, and for me, it was actually the food pyramid that kind of sent me down the rabbit hole. When I learned I was completely lied to about that, I started figuring out, oh my gosh, there's been so many things I've been, been lied to about, wars and education, and it's all kind of a scam. And so to say that something else that I believe to be true now may have not actually been the case, or that I'm looking at it through the wrong lens, or inappropriately. I've gotten to a point where I just have to leave my mind open to all those things, because I've been proven wrong so many times about so many previously held beliefs and certainties that I just don't know another way to go about it.
Yeah, you kind of can't unsee it once you see it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Once you know that there's a high likelihood that what you've been told, at the very best, is an alteration, and at the very worst is a complete and utter fabrication, and probably everywhere in between. That it's very hard to know exactly what happened, why, and I guess that's a big part of philosophy, right? Is you kind of pontificate, theorize, and try to tap into some sort of, again, back to what we were talking about in terms of wealth and your soul, and you're tapping into something that is not tangible, that's not actually physical or material, but has a meaning that's what you're trying to get into, and that's where the value lies as you go through and try to make sense of everything around us.
Right.
Yeah. Oh man, lots to think about. I mean, I could talk about all this stuff, and so we just talked for an hour and 10 minutes, minus our sound interruption. So maybe, I think we're at hour 5. So slightly less than that, about one topic and all the things has led off to, and barely briefly touched on Bitcoin a few times, and kind of multiply that by 8,000 other topics you could be talking about, and this stuff is it's just endless. And yeah, I don't know where I'm really going with this. Kind of just some thoughts for people to think about and chew on, I guess.
Well, all this, all these things, whether we're talking about passion or where value is, all of my thoughts have been completely altered by my contact with Bitcoin, and it's not because it's Bitcoin. It's because I figured it Bitcoin was like, for me, it was a mirror, and that mirror, it was just held up to the global financial situation. And when you realize that our money is well and truly screwed, you don't without something like Bitcoin, you don't get that. You don't get the reflection of a different way to see what is being presented to you as reality. it it modified the way that I thought about everything, because once again it is a once you see it, you can't unsee it. But in this particular case, once you figure out that money touches everything, then you start wondering, well, if our money is corrupt and infected, then what does the sickness look like in everything that it's touched, which is everything.
Well,
I mean,
I've been going back and forth with Fundamentals, aka Brian Hirschfield, on Noster, and him and Rob Hamilton just did a podcast talking about markets as amoral, and I said generally I agree that the market itself is amoral, but what happens when you have immoral actors? And I use the example of a futures contract where you say you're going to deliver something, and you know you cannot deliver on it. You know you do not have the physical good to deliver to the person, and you're just praying they'll settle with you in paper. So you can just give them dollars or borrow credit to pay them off, or go get a bailout to make good on your failed promise when you get sued because you didn't deliver the underlying commodity. Or you have naked shorting where you're literally selling more stock than exists. That you've
yeah,
It's impossible to have actually truly effectuated your trade, and that's only possible because of a credit-based monetary system. And so
right.
I've really been trying to think about, like, okay, yes, the market itself is amoral, but what happens when you have immoral impacts influencing the market? Now you have distorted prices. I mean, GameStop is the perfect example. You had a completely distorted price of an asset because immoral people were doing immoral acts because of immoral money. And so what does that mean? So what should the market price really have been? What was the company actually valued at? And so is that actually an amoral market anymore, or is it an immoral market? And I don't know, but that's exactly what you're talking about, is once the money's corrupted, how corrupt does everything else become? Because it has to be, because you're using a corrupt money.
Well, see, this is where biology overlaps into economics, or at least some of the fundamentals of what we see in biological systems overlaps. This is where I really like getting into bringing other subjects into Bitcoin. In this particular case, just bringing it into legacy markets, because if you think about it, money, like, think of it, let's start here. You ever, like, your mom and your dad probably at one point or another said, don't put that quarter in your mouth, money's dirty. And they're coming at it from a standpoint of there's germs. Like, somebody else touched it, they may have been sick, maybe it's carrying a virus, you put it in if the baby puts it in their mouth, they're like, oh my God, don't do that. Right? Paper money's even worse because there's all manner of pockets and pivots and all kinds of fibers that filth and disease vectors can get underneath. But so each one of these, like let's take it from a virus. A virus in and of itself is rather amoral, right? It's not immoral. It's just a thing.
Yep.
Right? It's the way that our bodies and our immune systems interact with that thing that causes problems. Virus left by itself does no harm. It's only when it comes into contact with me and I got a massive immune reaction from it that I got a problem. So the virus isn't the vector. I'm the vector.
Yes.
I'm the one that
Yes.
can take the virus from point A to point B. In this case, the money is the vector. And I'm not talking about actual physical viruses on the money and the money is dirty. But I'm talking about the fact that the money itself is corrupt. And so we start asking ourselves, where did that corruption come from? And then we don't even really have to answer that. What we do have to actually answer is say, we know the money is corrupt, and that money is going to go somewhere else. Is it going to corrupt that which it touches? And the virulence of this particular corruption is so deadly that the answer to that question is it will corrupt everything it touches.
That's
It will
very well
corrupt
said.
children. It will
Yep.
corrupt children. It will corrupt buildings. It will corrupt investments. It will corrupt all of it.
Yeah, that is very well
And,
said.
like, I think it would be interesting to find out what caused the corruption in the money. And there's hundreds of examples all the way, probably past Rome. And it could actually be a situation that Gene Roddenberry tried to solve with Star Trek, where they don't have money.
Yeah.
I, it's like it's a little utopian, but still, it's like it begs the question: was it really Rome that caused it by clipping coins
No.
and recasting silver with pewter? Was that the impetus? Because I don't think so. I think it came long before that, but I
Human
don't know
nature.
where. I can't.
Yeah.
I can't put my finger on it. It's like one of those things. But one thing that I do know is that money's corrupt, and I would have never known that had it not been for something like Bitcoin, which is like you can't corrupt these rules. You can try to fork it, and you can try to sell somebody on your fork, but the actual Bitcoin code itself, it just runs.
Yeah, I'm a big believer that it's just human nature, and it's just a spiritual battle of good and evil, and the evil breeds corruption, and yeah, to your point, as long as humans can control the money, they're gonna corrupt it, and it's just the nature of greed and corruption inside man, and maybe the one Caesar won't, but the next Caesar will, and
Yeah.
or maybe 10 Caesars won't, but the 11th will. And so you just kind of inevitably end back to the fallen nature of man that steps in and kind of ruins everything. I was thinking though, like I just want to get to this, and we'll close real quick. We could
Okay.
keep going forever, but unfortunately, my mother-in-law has been here for a long day, so I gotta let her go get home. But I was thinking of when you were talking about the intersection of Bitcoin and biology. The example that came to mind as I was talking about sort of naked shorting and undeliverable future contracts and those sort of things, was when you talked about what on the Daniel Prince podcast. Everyone should go listen to that episode with David on there. That's a much more in depth about this cathedral concept he's talking about than sort of the very, very high level um, uh, uh, that we've talked about here. But I was thinking of like the topsoil that you were talking about. Oh, you can't go into that topsoil and just pull more nutrients out of there, like or ions, if you will. That's a cut for those who've listened to the episode. But you can't just go in there and pull those out of there. Or like, hey, I farmed this wheat in this topsoil and it didn't have any of these nutrients, but don't worry, we'll have the same crop at the end of this year. Like reality punches you in the face of no, you didn't have the proper soil composition here to render a yield for this year, or the amount of yield that you wanted. And you don't just get to have a magic money printer come in and go, oh, here's your wheat, or oh, here's your cattle. And you actually have to have the composition of what's needed to grow those things to do it. And just that connection really stood out in my mind.
Yeah, and what underneath that is the knowledge that all the nutrients that you would ever need exist in almost all soils on the face of the planet, whether they've been wrecked by conventional farming or not. The phosphorus is there, the magnesium is there, the manganese is there, the iron's there. It's just locked up in a format that plants can't use. And the only thing that pulls that away and basically, for lack of a better term, mineralizes it in a way that plants can use it or makes it bioavailable are the critters in the soil. So when you pollute that soil with pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, you destroy that biome, and that biome is the only thing that has the ability in their genetics to generate the organic acids that cause the decomposition and mineralizes those elements. So when people say it's like my soil doesn't have any nutrition, that's not the problem. Your soil doesn't have any biology. That's the problem. Your soil's got the minerals, it's got the nutrition, but the biology's been so collapsed for so long that it's all locked up. So it looks like it's not there, but it's there. That's that's what makes me really excited about the future of agriculture. Is so many farmers are starting to go, I don't have to actually put this much nitrogen on. I don't have to put almost any nitrogen on. There's farmers that are like, all I dump on my fields now is biology. And they unlock everything that's in the underlying rock, bring it up to the soil. The plants are happy as can be.
There's a guy down in Mexico. He's green in the desert. And
yeah. It's like if you look at people like Jeff Lawton, he's got a YouTube video from way back, I think in the early '90s, maybe mid '90s, called "Greening the Desert." Except he's doing it over in Palestine or
it was
something,
like Middle East or Egypt or something like that. Yeah,
somewhere around there. So somewhere in this, one of these places that looks like a desert, and it's amazing what can actually be done if you don't let conventional thinking. And we've talked about the conventional thinking is basically we've been lied to. And you've got to think unconventionally. It sounds trite until you realize we're not trying to be trite. We're not saying think outside the box. What we're saying is that box is a prison for your mind. And if you can't get out of it, you will forever be running inside that loop. And things just get worse and worse and worse. And they call it the moron syndrome in agriculture. If you didn't grow a crop this year, you got to put more on. Not enough, nitrogen, put more on. You're a moron. You're just moroning all the time. And it doesn't help. You got to the point where, like, phosphorus is the last example I'll give you. You put a pound or 100 pounds or let's say 5 pounds to 50 pounds of phosphorus onto an acre, you will be able to get 25% utilization out of that year. That's it. The rest of it gets almost immediately locked up into the surrounding rock because it's really reactive. The phosphorus is still there, but without biology, you'll never get to it, and you'll have to put more on. And we've got ourselves into this loop, and farmers at this point, when they're 66 years old, they're not looking to learn something new. And it's not their fault. If we want to blame anything, we could blame low amounts of human lifespan. If we lived to 500 and they were 66, it'd be a completely different story. But this is what we've got. We've got a culture that has told us and continues to tell us the same crap over and over and over again. And we're coming to the end of that line. It's not working anymore.
The more
and a great many things, not just algebra, not just agriculture.
Yes, the moron concept is failing us. Well, David, I think that's a perfect note to go out on. We'll definitely do this again. There's many of the guests I have on. It's like, well, we definitely need a part 2, and so we'll definitely make sure we do a part 2. And so for people wanting to check you out, what's the best place to go? We got the podcast Bitcoin and we have at Nanya Business on Nostr. Where else would you want to send people?
Bitcoinandshow.com is my website.
Okay.
And you can get to like most of the stuff, the podcast and some of the writings that I've done, the Cathedral series. You can get to all that from bitcoinandshow, all one word, .com.
Perfect. And as always, you come check us out at Sovereign, SOVREIGN.io. That's the best place to get a hold of us. I'm Plebeian on Nostr. You can look me up by my Christian name, Brandon Karpeles, on LinkedIn, or you can follow the company on X at Sovereign BTC. We're also at Sovereign, SOVREIGN on Nostr as well. So, David, really appreciate this conversation, and I'm already looking forward to doing round 2 for sure.
Absolutely, Brandon. Thank you for inviting me on your show.
Of course. Thanks, David.